Okay, so we're now recording. And Kathy, if you can open us up.
I sure will. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining in to our Zoom session today. My name is Kathy Griffin-Futch. I am the program manager for the CLQ program. CLQ is the Center for Lesbian and Queer Women and Girls, a program of the Ruth Ellis Center. Thanks again, London, for having us, and thanks everybody for joining in. I'm going to hand it over to London at this time, and she'll tell us what to do from there. So thank you so much. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and welcome everyone. Welcome to our panelists. Welcome to our attendees. And today we are talking about promising practices for Beijing+25, strengthening visibility for women of color. And so as you can see, we have a dynamic panel of speakers. I will also be moderating our discussion today. And before I get started, I just want to recognize and acknowledge how difficult the time that we're in right now is, particularly within the last week. So what I'd like to do is hold a moment of silence for all those who have been impacted by violence in the last week, particularly George Floyd, and most recently, Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. So if we can hold a moment of silence. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you. So welcome again. And so today we have some wonderful speakers. We have Deidre D'Essen-Smith from the On My Detroit Everything movement. We have Pamela Alexander, Deputy Director of the Ruth Ellis Center. We have Famika Edmond, the founder of For the Love of Her, that's Healing, Empowerment, and Resilience. And then we also, of course, have Kathy Griffin-Futch, the REC Program Manager for the Center for Lesbian and Queer Women and Girls at Kofi House. It's a program of the Ruth Ellis Center. And then me, London, from Bell Global Justice Institute. But before I get started, I want to give all of our panelists about 2 minutes or so to introduce themselves. And so I'd like to start off with Pamela. Pamela, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Pamela Alexander, and I've been with the Ruth Ellis Center for about 5.5 years. It's been a wonderful experience for me. I am the Deputy Director responsible for policy initiatives, the accreditation process, developing and monitoring and managing programs, as well as supervising staff, just the day-to-day operations of the Ruth Ellis Center. I've worked in the human service field for about 35 years. I'm one of those folks who's looking forward to taking a little break and eventually, as planned, to retire sometime in a very soon time frame. But my work at the Ruth Ellis Center is extremely rewarding, and the young people that we serve there are just absolutely awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Famika, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
So my name is Famika Edmond. I am the founder of For the Love of Her, which stands for Healing, Empowerment, and Resilience. This was a program I started back in 2018 out of seeing the need of the necessity of having safe space for Black women to be able to congregate together and fellowship together. We do workshops. We have done all types of different events so far, just to be able to bring women together. And also a lot of our events are to educate women how to be able to advocate for themselves as far as healthcare, whether it's different resources in the community. But I felt like it was definitely a need. So I'm happy that we're going into our second year with it now.
Excellent, excellent. And Deidre, you take a moment?
Hi, my name is Deidre D'Essen-Smith of On My Detroit Everything, and it's an initiative that highlights the positive changes and positive investments that citizens of Detroit and imports of Detroit have put into our city. I'm also a facilitator of 2 workshops, one entitled STEMITS, Speak Your Mind, Mind Your Speech, and TIC, the Inclusion Cipher. where we focus on community building, outreach, restorative justice, and transforming conflict through the principles and elements of hip hop. I'm also involved in different organizations here and around the city. I'm also a cultural ambassador with Next Level program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Kathy.
Hi, I am Kathy Griffin Futch. I am the program manager of the Center for Lesbian and Queer Women and Girls, which is a program of the Ruth Ellis Center. The Center for Lesbian and Queer Women and Girls is just like a center for resources for gay women or non-binary women. It's a drop-in center. It's a group center. It's a center for women to come together and congregate. It's a center for women to hold workshops. It's a center for women to get therapy. It's a center for women to get needed resources.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you all for your introductions. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with talking a little bit about Bell Global Justice Institute, but also talking about the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which is what we're going to be discussing today, and the purpose of the Beijing Declaration and the importance of including women of color in our intersections in the implementation of this global policy. So before I'll do that, I'll start out. My name is London Bell. I am an international human rights attorney, international human rights lawyer, and I have been, I focused my training on international human rights law, international business and trade law, and I have studied the United Nations, the principles and work of the United Nations and its international treaty system. And so what I do is I do a lot of work in communities, particularly with youth and young adults, teaching people in the community about international mechanisms and how to use them in their grassroots advocacy, teaching people about the United Nations in general, and just reasons to support, reasons why it's important for the U.S. to have a strong presence at the UN and a strong leadership at the UN. Bell Global Justice Institute is an organization, an NGO that I founded in March of 2016. And our mission, we work to advance the human rights of women and girls. And we do that through education. We do that through just empowering the voice and raising the voice of women and girls here at home and globally. The organization, Bell Global Justice Institute, I named it in honor of my brother, Staff Sergeant Vincent James Bell of the U.S. Marine Corps. Vincent was a Marine who served 10.5 years in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he did 5 deployments, 4 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan, where he was killed in action in Afghanistan on November 30th, 2011. He was committed to service. He has a very strong legacy of service, and he also mentored young people. And so I want to honor his legacy and his work, and also our work in human rights through naming it after him. And so with that, Bell Global Justice Institute has partnered with many organizations in the local community, and I'm very proud to have partnerships with For the Love of Her, the On My Detroit Everything movement, and the Ruth Ellis Center and the Center for Lesbian and Queer Women and Girls. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. First, I want to say that we were all supposed to have this discussion at the United Nations during the Commission on the Status of Women back in March. And for those that are not familiar with the Commission on the Status of Women, it is a 2-week gathering at the United Nations in March of every year, where all of the discussion, all of the activity is focused on the human rights and the voices of women and girls globally. They're generally, I don't even know, maybe 90 member states involved. Usually about 9,000 or 10,000 people come from all over the planet We all gather in New York at the New York headquarters, and the NGO CSW, the non-governmental organization, Commission on the Status of Women, they are located in New York, and they actually organize non-governmental organizations to host parallel events around the city while member states are meeting inside the UN. We were selected to host a parallel event on this topic of strengthening the visibility of women and girls in the implementation, women and girls of color, in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration. However, due to COVID-19, the Commission on the Status of Women was canceled, and many organizations have gone to virtual platforms. So this is what we're doing today. And the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, it's the most comprehensive global policy ever created to advance human rights for women and girls. It was created in 1995. Governments from around the world, along with advocates, civil society, met in Beijing, China, for the 4th World Conference on Women. And so it was for 2 weeks. During these 2 weeks, heads of government, civil society discussed, debated, negotiated, argued on the human rights issues impacting women and girls. So at the end of this 2-week period, this international policy on women and girls was created and adopted, and it's now known as the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. And that was in 1995. So this year is a pivotal year for this global policy. It's the 25th anniversary. And so we're calling it Beijing+25. And so this year at the Commission on the Status of Women and throughout the year, global society is now looking at how well this policy has been implemented around the world and what more we can do to ensure that it continues to be implemented. And so the declaration actually outlines 12 critical areas of concern for countries to improve for women and girls. And I'm just going to read off those areas. Women in poverty, education and training of women, women in health, violence against women, women in armed conflict, women in the economy, women in power and decision-making, institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women, human rights of women, women in the media, women in the environment, and the girl child. And so our work today, what we're going to be talking about today from each of the women on this panel is included in within the 12 areas of critical concern, 12 critical areas of concern. And so we're going to talk about it from the perspective of women of color, women and girls of color. Oftentimes when there are movements around, human rights for women and girls, many times the voices of women of color and our intersections are not always in the forefront. So we're going to be presenting ideas and ways that could happen, okay? So I'm going to just do a question and answer with each of our panelists, and then after each question and answer portion with each speaker, we'll open it up for questions before we move on to the next speaker. So the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to start out with Pamela, and then I'm going to move to Kathy, and then we'll talk with Famika, and then we'll talk with Deidre, and Deidre will close us out. Okay, sound good? All right. All right. So Pamela, you are the Deputy Director of the Ruth Ellis Center, and I love the story of Ruth Ellis. Could you tell us a little bit more about Ruth Ellis and why this organization was created?
Yes, this organization was created due to the fact that it became known to the gay community in Detroit that there were many homeless young people back in 1998, 1999, and they wanted to do something about it. At the same time, we fell in love with Ruth Ellis, who lived to be 101. She lived in 3 centuries. She was an out Black lesbian who grew up in Chicago but moved to Detroit sometime in the early I think 1915 or so. And she lived the rest of her life here in Detroit, Michigan. So we're trying to address the issue of homelessness for gay youth at that time, back in the late 90s. Civic-minded gay activists got together and said, you know, we need to do something. So they decided to start the process and open up an agency that would support homeless youth. And in honor of Ruth Ellis, they decided to call the agency the Ruth Ellis Center. And since that time, 20 years, we have served thousands of young people who have come through our doors. And ironically, the Ruth Ellis Center is not a shelter, but we provide a vast amount of resources to help young people navigate systems that are in Detroit. And then throughout the years, expanded on to providing services and partnering with the state and then states across the country. We became recognized as a national leader in this work, and also on to international global work, which is the reasons why reaching out to Bell Global Justice seemed like just a natural fit because of the work that your organization does with the United Nations. And I just want to share with you the mission statement for the Ruth Ellis Center: creating opportunities with LGBTQ plus young people to build their vision for their future, you know, for a future. And that pretty much says it. We don't decide what it is that young people should be doing. We create the platforms in which they can grow and develop and be nurtured and supported. Teaching them how to use their voice, how to use their vote in making conscientious decisions about what direction they want to go in life. And within the last 3 years, our organization went through a 5-year strategic plan. And so 5 major components of services we're looking to work on at this time. And this is a big one because of the fact that there is limited resources available to support homeless young people. Our agency will be breaking ground at, I think, sometime fall of the year to build a 43-unit apartment building specifically for this population. And it is truly a blessing that it'll be right in the city of Detroit, and it's projected to open in 2021. The next program, which is dear to my heart, the Center for Lesbian, Queer Women and Girls, it just seemed like day one, there was not enough programming that was supporting young women who identified as lesbian, queer, trans, non-conforming. So once again, working with very civic-minded folks who came in and supported this process. Of course, Kathy will talk about that in much more detail. We now have a safe space for queer young women and girls. We also have a training institute, the Ruth Ellis Center Training Institute. And this is the arm of the organization that supports local providers, the local governments, the state government, and national and international governments across many lands to teach and nurture and support people who make decisions about young people around SOGI, which is sexual education, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, SOGI, because everyone has an orientation, but too often people make decisions about what young people should and should not do, and it places them at risk, particularly within the child welfare system as well as juvenile justice. And we are working diligently to expand our behavioral health program because we know that young people are being disproportionately displaced and not being provided the kind of support they need as it relates to behavioral health services. Family preservation, we work with families across all spectrums, to support young people. We also have a 9-bed intensive treatment unit for young people, for LGBTQ who unfortunately sometimes end up in foster care. And that program we've had for about 15 years. And last but not least is Second Stories. Second Stories is the bedrock of the Rubella Center. This is the program that started the agency. It's where young people can come, feel safe, get a meal, get clothes, wash their clothes, hang out, network, do job searching, use the computer, just be with other young people like themselves. And so hot foods, pantry, clothing, computer lab, tutoring, peer groups. There's a program that supports trans young youth. We have case management services as well. So overall, the Rubella Center, by my standards, is a one-stop shop. And it has been a pleasure to be there for 5.5 years to support young people that I truly, truly love and support.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Pamela. One of the things that I know Bell Global and Ruth Ellis has partnered to work with young people to take them to the United Nations. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and what it was like?
Yeah, that was exciting. Okay, so I believe that was in 2019, yeah. London was contracted to work with some of our youth through the Youth Advisory Board to participate in a workshop to learn about global initiatives and more specifically the United Nations. And at the end of that process, my director was able to gather up some funds and actually supported, I think it was a total of 15 young people, plus myself, and in London, of course, was in attendance to the Youth Summit at the United Nations, an experience by far. Most had never been on a plane, certainly had never been to New York, and to walk in that huge hall that most people see on TV, the United Nations. They got a chance to network and work with other young people, attend workshops, massive workshops, because I believe there was, I don't know, literally thousands of young people there. So they really, really enjoyed themselves. And they got a chance to experience New York. What an amazing opportunity for them.
Yes, it was amazing. And, one of the pivotal moments at it's the Global Engagement Summit through the United Nations Association, is that during a breakout session for women and girls, one of our young people, Amara, a young trans woman of color, had an opportunity to ask a question in front of 500 people on how different international NGOs are working to include women and girls, transgender women and girls, particularly of color, in their programming. And it was revolutionary at that moment. I had never actually heard a young person ask that question during a Global Engagement Summit at the United Nations. It was recorded through UN Web TV, and the organizations that were on the panel really didn't answer the question fully. And so that created some dialogue, that created an opportunity for dialogue. And so those are the moments that I believe that are important when we're talking about being inclusive, intersection, of our intersections for women of color under the Beijing Declaration, because we need to make sure we're including everyone in this implementation of this global policy. So thank you very much, Pamela.
And the question was very simple. The question was, this is a global initiative, and many of you organizations represent huge organizations around the globe. What are you doing for trans youth? And the audience was silent, quiet, And the panel just looked at each other because they didn't have an answer. They didn't know
Yeah.
what to say. So,
And hopefully that sparked dialogue within their organizations.
right.
So thank you so much. I'd like to turn to Kathy now. First, before I do that, I wanted to find out if there are any of the participants that have any questions. If you have questions, you can raise your hand and let's see, you should be able to raise your hand. It should be at the top or the bottom of your screen. And if you want to say something without raising your hand, you can also use the chat portion. If you go to the top, there should be a chat box you can use. So feel free to dialogue in the chat box as well. Okay. So Kathy, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. You are the new program manager of the Ruth Ellis Center for Lesbian and Queer Women and Girls. Tell us a little bit about your vision for this program and how you see it evolving.
Thank you for the question, London. First, let me just say I'm very honored to be a part of the Ruth Ellis Center and to be in this position. Finally, Ruth Ellis has found a space for lesbian and queer women and girls. Ruth Ellis is a LGBT center, but they created a space just for lesbian, identifying, and queer and non-binary women and girls, and I think that is an amazing thing. So my vision for the center, if you heard Pam talk a little bit about the second story program, so it's gonna be a little bit of everything, a little bit of the second story activities, a little bit of group therapy for African-American women of color that identify as queer or lesbian. It's gonna be more like a social service agency, a one-stop shop, but geared towards lesbian women and girls. And non-binary women and girls. So it's gonna be, I'm really, really excited about it. And when it's time for me to talk about it, I have this big vision of what I want to happen like overnight, like yesterday, but I know things take time to, to come together. So it's gonna be a little second story. It's gonna be a little social service stuff that we provide. It's gonna be an educational component to it as well, London. So we have a grant to go into 9 Detroit public schools to talk about who we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it, and also creating a space for gay or non-binary or queer girls to come and have a safe space for them to be themselves. Also, we're going to provide local for students, like a feminine hygiene pantry, a diaper pantry for low-income clients that we might have. Again, I talked about therapy. Also, we're going to have an art component to it, where women can come in and they can create art, display their art. Also, spoken word. Deidre will talk a little bit about that later on when it's her turn. So we're going to have an art component to it as well. It's going to be like a drop-in center where we have extended hours because we believe that resources are needed after 5 o'clock. So it'll be a time where women can come in and get services past the 5 o'clock p.m. hour. We'll still be open and we'll still be servicing women and girls. Also, outside of the education component, outside of the social service component, outside of the therapy component, we'll also be like a hangout place, like a community center for women to come. If you just want to come in, get something to drink, and talk about your day, you'll be able to do that as well.
Good, 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 excellent. Why is it important to have this safe space for lesbian and queer women and girls right now?
The reason why it's important for us to have our own space is because, as you know, as we all know, the world is so male dominating at this point, and we have always had to fight for a space, especially African American women, fight for a space to call our own. We're constantly always sharing. We're constantly always sharing with people that don't look like us. We constantly always sharing with males. And so to create a space just for us was important to the Ruth Ellis Center. And it was important to me, something that we could actually have for us and call our own. And for women to be who they are in the fullness without anything attached to it, to be able to come out and be who you are and have a comfortable, safe space to do that. It was important that Ruth Ellis created that space.
Excellent. Beautiful. Now, Kathy, you are in your own right a dynamic community leader with a lot of community partners and friends. And so I'd like to know, I know you spoke about the Detroit Public Schools. Are there any other community partners that you would hope to work with the center?
Yes, we're always going to reach out and try to partner with Alternatives for Girls. If you're familiar with Alternatives for Girls, because they also believe in women's rights and they always hold a spot for women. So we're looking to partner with Alternatives for Girls. We're always partnering with the Detroit Health Department because our health is very important to us. So we're always looking for opportunities to partner with the Detroit Health Department. Also, with agencies that provide HIV counseling and testing, with social service agencies that provide COVID-19 testing. So keeping us in the loop of Planned Parenthood, also Detroit Health Department, Matrix Human Services, Alternatives for Girls, and different social service agencies, along with Detroit Public Schools, and different social service agencies that provide the same type of services, but that's not geared towards women and girls.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. And Ruth Ellis Center is located in Highland Park, and the center is located in Detroit. Am I correct on that? Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any upcoming projects or anything you'd like to share with the community right now, or participants that are on?
Well, right now, since COVID-19 has pushed everything back, we're moving slowly to get our space disinfected and cleaned out. But in July, we'll be posting some upcoming events because Pride was pushed back this year. We were hoping to participate in all Pride events this year, Detroit Motor City Pride, Hotter Than July, and things of that nature. But because things have been pushed back because of COVID-19, we'll definitely have some programming, some Pride programming coming up to celebrate Pride later in the year.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, this is going great so far. And I think this is a great transition into talking with Famika about, health disparities. And she has a great PowerPoint that she has prepared. And I'm going to just kind of ask her questions based on information that she's prepared on the invisible community, health disparities for Black women and girls. And Famika, thank you for joining us today. And to start out, could you tell us what are health disparities?
So
in general?
Basically, health disparities are like conditions. It can also be environmental conditions. So when we're addressing disparities in health and healthcare, we also have to look at social justice as a standpoint, but also improving health for all Americans by achieving improvements overall quality of care and population health. So when we look at from a financial health disparities standpoint, it can be very costly. A recent analysis estimated that disparities can mount up to $93 billion in access in medical care costs, and also $42 billion in lost productivity per year, as well as economic losses due to premature deaths. So when we look at that, we have to look at the whole picture when we talk about health disparities, because it's not just me not being able to access care, it's being able to get to the care, it's being able to get nutrition, proper food, and being able to get proper quality education, being able to pay for me to go and have care, because that is a big component to why a lot of people do not seek out care, and we end up having many type of pre-existing conditions.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. and with that, so Black women and girls, tell us a little bit about the types of health disparities that we have in particular.
So I'm gonna give you the full list, but
Mhm.
I was just gonna go over today, just 4 main ones that I know is really truly impacting, and our numbers are super high. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, HIV, AIDS, maternal mortality, asthma, and mental health. And I really want to stress about mental health because a lot of talk is not surrounded around it, especially in the Black culture. Many times we're told that we should not be seeking out mental health services. So many times we won't, even if we are suffering from depression. We have to look at, come from a long lineage of people who have had to deal with so many types of oppression that we have psychological and emotional abuse that we've had to deal with. And unfortunately, many of us don't know how to unpack that. And unfortunately, a lot of our mental health services are not available, or they're very streamlined, and you can only get a certain amount of visits. And depending on what type of insurance you have is going to depend on whether or not you're going to be able to seek mental health services. Another one I wanted to talk about is cancer, especially breast cancer. Even though with our white counterparts, white women, they are usually diagnosed a lot higher than us, our mortality rates are a lot higher than our white counterparts, because many times we are not diagnosed in a timely frame. And that's because we're not having those conversations, or our physicians are not having those conversations with us. Many times we don't have adequate assurance to be able to go and get the mammograms, or know where the resources are, because there are some clinics that are out there that can provide services for you if you are limited with insurance. But if you don't know where to seek it. So these are some of the reasons why our mortality rate is high. Then HIV/AIDS. So I'm going to give our figures here in Detroit. Right now, we have 4,799 cases here in the city of Detroit. Out of that, we have 1,131 females that have been diagnosed. And Black women, just like our Black men, we are disproportionately higher than our white counterparts and even our Latino counterparts. So, and a lot of times, it's especially because of me being in the health field, we are not considered an at-risk demographic. So a lot of times the education and the attention is not put on women. And that is definitely missing when we are seeking services. And a lot of times when we do seek services, that might not be a test that our physician offers us if we don't ask for it.
Wow.
And my last one I wanted to talk about was definitely about maternal mortality rates. In doing my investigation and research for this, it astonished me how, for us to live in such a developed country, for us to have such high rates for maternal mortality. Texas has what, 85.6% of maternal rates for Black women. And out of the US is 47.2% out of our other counterparts of maternal mortality deaths. And many times it's because when women go in and state their concerns that this pregnancy is not feeling right, many times these things are not being addressed, is overlooked, and the woman is sent home. And where they can have a full workup to figure out what is going on with them, a lot of times those concerns are pushed to the side. And many times women don't make it through their whole pregnancy. They may set up hypertension where it's not addressed in a timely manner, and ultimately it can also kill the baby. So these are some of the things that we're facing right now in our Black female community.
Wow, that's incredible. You know, why do you think Black women and girls are struggling so much to be recognized and to have access, you know, in our health system today? Why do you think that is?
I think many times we're overlooked because of some of the implicit biases that are put on us. Many times doctors feel like we're just making up whatever we, you know, what's ever going on with us, and really don't want to address it. So I think that's a huge factor. Physicians not having those conversations with their patients. And two, resources, not knowing where the resources are available, especially if you live in an urban community. Many times we are redlined to the resources that are available in our community. And so if we're not able to get to where they are, we're not going to go. If we don't have access to, depending on like what type of employment we have, we may not have access to reasonable and quality insurance where we can go and see our doctors. So I think a lot of that impacts the reason why this is not being addressed on a level with our Black females and girls.
Okay, okay.
And
Now
that was,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, I was saying, and that was one of the reasons why my title was We Were the Invisible Community, because we're being overlooked.
We are. And that's why it's so important that we talk about strengthening visibility, particularly with this important global policy, making sure our voices and, like I said, the intersections of our lives are at the forefront, because they're not right now in many ways. And so I really appreciate the information that you're sharing. And I know you spoke earlier when you were talking earlier about, you know, different reasons for health disparities. And could you tell us what is the social determinants of health? What does that mean, and what are they?
So it's almost like the hierarchy of what we should look at with our health, how our health outcomes should be. So there's 6 areas in social health determinants. You have your economic stability, neighborhood and physical environment, education, food, and social context and healthcare system. Overall, what your social health determinants are the conditions in which people are born, grow up in, live in, work, and how they age in. And if any of those things you have any type of deficiencies in, it is going to impact your health outcomes, your mortality rate, your morbidity rate, your life expectancy, your health expenditures, because if you don't have proper insurance, you're going to have bills from going and seeking care. Also, status, health status, and functional limitations. So overall, that is what health determinants are. Long story short, it's where the conditions on where people are born, where they're raised, where they live, where they work, and how they age out in those particular societies.
Okay. And so with that, let's talk COVID-19.
Okay.
Our community, the Black community, has been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and women and girls are disproportionately impacted. Could you tell us a little bit about that impact, why it's such a high rate, and how even the impact on Black men and boys has impacted women and girls?
Okay, so I'm gonna just give our figures first of all.
Sure.
So then that way I can run into that. So with the COVID-19, especially with the Detroit community, we were very impacted by this virus. In Detroit, there were nearly 80%, for us, 80% of our population is Black. Statewide, 32% are all confirmed COVID-19 cases in Michigan involve Black patients, yet that only makes up 13.6% of the state's 10 million people. So more than 40% of all COVID-19 deaths in the state were African Americans. And how it's impacted, and also, I'm sorry, my phone keeps slipping down.
It's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Also, out of the deaths between Black males and Black females, Black males unfortunately have taken the burden of dying from the COVID-19, where females either recovered or their death tolls were a lot lower than the Black males. So some of the reasons why we are looking at that has been played a factor is our living condition, our work circumstances, underlying health conditions, and lower access to care. And also for women, being single moms and not having a lack of support during this time. So when we talk about living conditions, many Blacks are more likely to live in densely populated areas because of institutional racism in the form of residential housing segregation. So people living in densely populated areas may find it more difficult to practice prevention measures such as social distancing that we were supposed to be doing. So take, for instance, if I live in a low income housing, I can only afford a 2-bedroom apartment, and I have my mom, my grandma there, and my kids running around in there. How much social distancing are we really going to be doing? Not much. So then, as I said before, redlining, that plays a big factor on why a lot of we have the institutional racism going on in these particular areas. Because redlining is a systematic denial of various services by the federal governments, agencies, local governments, as well as private sector to the residents of Pacific, most notably our Black people. Next would be our work circumstance. Many people, we have a lot of people who are African American that are essential workers, especially women. We work in many types of, many of us are registered nurses and working in the health field, or CNAs. Many of us are cashiers and working and doing fast foods, or working at these stores and stuff. And sometimes with those particular stores, the lower wage stores, they are not going to give us those incentives where we can work from home. So many of us were not afforded that and had to still continue to work through the whole pandemic. So because of that, it did put more people at risk of being out in the public, trying to make sure that we all were being taken care of that was back at home. Also, because of being afraid of losing their jobs, many times they will not call in if they were sick. So that's why too, I think that's why it increased the spread here in Detroit so rapidly, because many times when people were sick, they were afraid of losing their jobs. So they still attended work. And then, as I was saying, underlying conditions. Us not having adequate insurance. A lot of times, if we do know we have like a pre-existing condition and we're not treating that, then many times it will go left untreated and get worse. So then with this COVID disease, this virus likes to get on an individual who has pre-existing conditions and ravage the body. Inadequate access to care. Not being able, like I said before, being able to access care in a manner where you're having quality care and you're getting treated decently. Because one thing too, because I also had to do calls during this time for COVID, I got one of the things that it kept resonating with me was that people were saying they were turned away just to get tested. So when people were going back home that went to seek testing, but because either their insurance or their criteria for them to be able to get tested did not meet the qualifications, they went home, and many of them died at home. So we also have to look at the stigma and systemic inequalities that may be underlying prevention efforts, increase levels of chronic and toxic stress, and ultimately sustain health and healthcare disparities that we're talking about. And then last, I definitely wanted to talk about single mothers, because it is very difficult right now being a single mother going through this pandemic, because I have to still worry about when I have to go back into work, who's going to watch my daughter? Because right now daycares in the school system is closed. So if you don't have the support system in place, who is going to take care? So then you may have to call off of work, and it's just a repetitive cycle that you're going through. And for single moms, as far as Black women, we are 40% higher than any of our white and Latino counterparts.
Thank you so much, Mamika. I have one last question for you before we take questions from participants. Right now, we're in a state of emergency in the United States, and there are protests happening. I think yesterday was the 8th night, and it's probably going to continue. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and but we have to address what's happening in the country with our relationship with law enforcement. How do you foresee this outcome for people who are out there protesting, like the risk of COVID-19, because it's still there? Are you concerned?
And I also feel like right now, because of everything that's been going on, it has overshadowed. We still have a pandemic going on. and
Yeah.
that's been put to the side. But as far as like our justice system, definitely, I was looking at Ohio and how they had put some executive orders in place to start a statewide task force about the injustice of the with the police department there. And what they did, they went out in the community, they got feedback from community members and people who lived in the community, took that information back and gave it to the governor. And then they sat down and came up with a plan to how they were going to effectively tackle the injustice with the police brutality that's we are facing right now in the United States. And I think that that has to be, maybe that can be modeled throughout
Mhm.
the United States. But one thing we're gonna have to do, definitely we're gonna have to change leadership. So, and me saying that, it's so important this year when November, everybody's out protesting right now, and I love it and love seeing it's a rainbow of people out there right now protesting. And, you know, but at the end of the day, when November rolls around here, we have to make sure that not only was our voice heard today, but it's heard in November as far as removing who we have in leadership. Because I feel like until we do that, we can do it on a state level, but federal, I don't think it's going to happen.
Thank you so much, Famika.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I want to take a moment. If anyone has any questions, if you want to just drop your question in the chat box, please do so. Even if we're talking, you know, on another subject, you know, feel free to just drop something in the chat box if you want anything to be answered. And it's particularly for Kathy and Famika. I will say that, you know, following, before I speak with Deidre, I want to take a moment and just follow Famika and what you're talking about with health disparities. And for me, it's very personal because, you know, I have an autoimmune disease and that I developed when I was younger, right after law school. And so I now live with a disability. And that's one of the reasons why for me, it's so important that the voices of women of color are visible in the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and around its 12 areas of concern. You know, just as an example, you know, I do a lot of, you know, activism and advocacy on various issues. So I am often on Capitol Hill in DC, and, you know, just most recently, I think it was in 2018, I was in DC on Capitol Hill, like all other Americans that are on Capitol Hill, advocating for different issues, except for I had an oxygen tank and I had a big bag of medicine and water and whatever else I needed. And what I realized is that it's a struggle just to go to Capitol Hill to be an advocate if you are someone who is differently abled. And, you know, there are no, in the House building, for instance, there were no benches for me to sit and rest. There were no plugs for me to plug up my oxygen tank because it was near empty. So, and I was so frustrated and I felt so alone because I'm in the midst of all of these people, you know, walking back and forth. And I had to sit on the floor, and I found a plug, and I just sat on the floor with the plug, you know, my tank plugging up until my next meeting. And I never felt so, you know, alone and forgotten about. And so that's one of the reasons why this discussion is so important, because it's important that all of us have access to be able to be an advocate for ourselves and our communities, for all of the ways we identify. You know, I'm an American that's differently abled, and I should have the same access, or at least be accommodated, you know, enough so that I can go to speak to my congressman about issues that impact me. And so one of the things that I really want to push for is, as we are implementing this global policy on a local, national, and international level, to make sure that there is space at the table for all of us. There needs to be a seat at the table for women with disabilities, for women living with HIV, for discussions around COVID-19, for gay and lesbian and queer and non-binary women. There needs to be a seat for everyone at the table. And that's not always happening in different communities around the world. So I just wanted to share that as well before we go on to our next speaker. And I'm very excited about Deidre.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm well considering the state of our country. In the world, I'm well.
Good, 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 good. I'm very, really appreciate you being here. And I just wanted to, talk to you a little bit about, because you're coming from a very unique space of art and spoken word as a way of expression and advocacy and human rights, preserving human rights. So I wanted to just start out to say, you have developed innovative ways to empower youth and adults through art. So I'm just going to take some time here and ask you questions about the different programs that you've developed and ways that they have created visibility for women and girls of color and the intersection of our lives. So first, I want to ask you, you are the founder of the On My Detroit Everything movement. So tell us more about the foundation of this revolutionary movement. Tell us more.
Well, everything stems from the need for visibility. And at the time that I conceived On My Detroit Everything, I myself was going through homelessness, uncertainties about if I'd be accepted into familial structures, work settings, community settings. Here I was with my identity and my gripings with what life had to offer me as a young adult. And I found myself in a city to have a synonymous story that paralleled in the sense of being on the downside of things. Everyone was counting Detroit out. Everybody was counting me out at the time. But I stayed with it. I stayed with life. Detroit kept progressing. And one thing that sustained the city while it was going through its bankruptcy and emergency management was its artist community. And there's one thing to be said about art. When the rest of the world is facing catastrophe and lack, artists always sustain not only themselves, but the communities around them. Why? Because we may be impoverished as a whole, but there are different subcultures that are still rich. Why? Because if you don't have $5,000 for mortgage, you certainly have $50 for a good time tonight.
Mm-hmm.
For a good time tonight, you're going to spend about $25 with me. And so what On My Detroit Everything is the common theme that I'm hearing from all of the speakers this afternoon is visibility. Visibility is very political. Angela Davis just said on Girl Trek in her conversation with Nikki Giovanni, the politics of appearance is very important. The world needs to see that we're not poor, regardless of economic status. We are not a poor people. Black women and girls are not disposable. We are very valuable. And what better way to say that than with my own voice and my narrative? Because in doing so, I composed a few programs, one of which is STEM and Speak Your Mind, Mind Your Speech, and TIC, the Inclusion Cipher. It gives women and girls the opportunity to create narrative empathy. And what that is a process of storytelling that allows one to step into the shoes of another while recognizing the other's identity and differences. Because right now what we're hearing too, and we've heard it so often, is I don't see color. I don't see different. Well, that's very dismissive of you. Mm-hmm. Not only do I want you to see it, I want you to hear it, I want you to feel it, I want you to acknowledge it, and most of all, appreciate it. And so when you create this narrative empathy, you create dialogue, which then creates relationships, which then creates understanding. Even if that understanding doesn't come with a camaraderie or an agreement, at least you understand that my presence is necessary and important. So On My Detroit Everything is basically an umbrella for the workshops and curriculums that I developed that were specifically designed with culture in mind for Black youth and adults. It's intergenerational. In the Black community, one thing that sustained us, certainly during times like these, are our relationships with our elders. This isn't a foreign time for us. This situation isn't foreign to us. We know how to hunker down and hide out and still be relevant and still have our appearances and our presence known. Now, in this time, I think it's very important that we have contact theory. And contact theory tends to follow narrative empathy. And with contact theory, through narrative empathy, you get a reduction of stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination, in the process of having group members come together ideally, right? Mm-hmm. And so then in doing that, you share equal status because you have common goals. Then you become in cooperation with those people that you have common goals with. And then there's institutional support after that. And that all coincides in what we're seeing today with riots. We're coming together in the face of a pandemic. This is all about narrative empathy, relatability, relationship, and most of all, visibility. That's what On My Detroit Everything is at its core. It's saying that I have something to offer. I have so much to offer, and I think that it'll be very beneficial for those who will accept it. And so in order to change my environment, I started with me. Mm-hmm. I put the scope on me. I wanted to extract all those things that were beautiful and all those things that were ugly. And I wanted to be On My Detroit Everything. How can I contribute? I didn't want to spiral down in my circumstances. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't die. I had to be visible. I could not die in my condition. So that's what all of this is about, from the curriculums to the moniker to the initiative. And the biggest thing about On My Detroit Everything is I never tell you how to wear the brand, mm-hmm. how to state the initiative, how to state the mantra even. I let you tell me how it best represents you. So maybe you're not an activist. Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe you're not mm-hmm. a teacher. Maybe you're a baker, so on and so forth. So it's all about representation and presence of people. That's what it all boils down to.
I love it. I love it, Deidre. Thank you so much. It looks like we have a question from Rachel. Let's see. Rachel, I'm gonna give Rachel an opportunity to ask her question. Rachel, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you to all the panelists so much and thank you, Pamela, for creating this space. So I'm a young Black woman and I work at the United Nations in New York. And, you know, a lot of my work is in the international arena. And even though I'm a part of a lot of networks for Black professionals in international affairs and young Black females and women of color in international affairs, I still feel like when I go to the meetings that matter, the meetings that impact policy, the meetings that enact real change, I still don't see a lot of Black women or young Black women in particular. And so I'm kind of just wondering what sort of advice you have, you know, for me as a young person working in this space, how I can hold space or create opportunities or even just find ways to engage more young Black women within the space of international affairs, especially in regards to like global feminism, for example.
Is there any one of our panelists that'd like to answer that? Pamela? Can you unmute yourself? Give us one.
I'll take a stab at it. And yes, this is a difficult challenge when it comes to Black women feeling supported and having peers be a part of their life. And so what I would suggest you consider doing is try your best to reach out and find others like you and form some level of affinity group in the international arena around women, Black women's rights, and just the idea of being able to have that connectivity so that you could have those dialogues either through face-to-face meetings or through something related to social media. But building on that support piece is really, really very, very important because it's so difficult out here. You know, I've been in human services for 35 years, and you know, the higher you go, the less people you see look like you at the table. And then when you get to the table, the expectation is that you really can't be speaking at the table. You shouldn't have a whole lot to say because it's really, you know, being ran by white patriarchal, you know, systems. And so, but building that professional support base is really, really important because you are involved in international affairs related to the work that you do. There are others out there, and just looking at the opportunity, if nothing else, in your immediate workspace to see if there's the possibility of developing an affinity group.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to answer Rachel's question?
I was just going to say that was one of the reasons why I had created For the Love of Her. I'll just give you a quick, short, brief backstory to why I had started The Love of Her. I had received a call from a client one day. First of all, it was like somebody who knew me from doing case management because her daughter had tried to commit suicide. And the reason why her daughter tried to commit suicide was because she had contracted herpes from someone, and she got shamed about it. So when I went out to actually speak to her and everything, you know, and console her and also let her know that this was not something that was dirty. It was nothing bad, you know, but she also wanted to seek out some type of group with women who looked like her. Mm-hmm. So her being, she didn't live in Detroit, but she was going to school at Wayne State University. So I looked to see if there was any type of programs that she could go ahead and participate in. Unfortunately, there really wasn't anything that would suit what she needed at that time. So I did speak to one of my supervisors and try to see if it was something at work we can do. Unfortunately, because of funding, we just did not have funding for it. So I just was like, you know what? I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to be about it and put something together. So that was one of the reasons why I created For the Love of Her, to be able to create that space, be able to create a space that women, Black women, can fellowship, and we can learn from each other's stories that we've been through and how it's impacted us, and help us with our walks through life.
Thank you.
And if I could just piggyback on what Famika just said, now beyond the workplace, certainly that was the number one reason why the idea and the concept of the Center for Lesbian, Queer Women and Girls just seemed like it was just absolutely time, because as Kathy suggested, you know, there was no space for queer Black women to be able to socialize and network, you know, and that had been part of what was lacking, the invisibility of queer Black women in the city of Detroit for ever since the beginning of the Rubella Center. So the Center for Lesbian and Queer Women and Girls is the only program right now that exists to support Black queer young women and girls. So I would suggest just, you know, doing your research, finding something that fits you, and guess what? If you don't find anything, create it yourself. Because once you do that, people will come, you know, and you may have to be the person to get it started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Is it possible to ask a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
On the topic of sort of creating affirming and uplifting spaces for Black women, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on how to sort of reconcile with a lot of the almost emotional abuse and disrespect that Black women face within the Black community? I feel like, given current events, you know, Black women are often the ones advocating for Black men and the ones showing up when it matters. However, you know, there's tons of cases where, I mean, in my personal experiences, I faced a lot of disrespect and mistreatment from Black men. So how do I reconcile continuing to show up for the community as a whole and not just for Black women, but for also Black men, given, you know, my personal experiences with the Black community.
I believe, I'm sorry, Kathy.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
I believe
teacher.
it's the tireless effort of Black women to kind of be the glue for the whole diaspora. It's very unfair. It's very unfortunate, but we are strong, and we are strong within our collective thought and consciousness amongst our sisters. And what we don't get from our brothers at a particular time, we draw from our sisters. And naturally, they'll have to come around. Everything has its balance. Everything has its opposite. You're going to need that feminine presence sooner than later. I guarantee you, brother. And right now, what we're seeing is where Black Lives Matters was dismissed due to sexuality, due to gender, we see 50 states, 18 countries saying Black Lives Matter. And why? Because Black women were the bullhorn to first say it. Even when Black men were saying, I'm not getting down with that. Well, not now. But eventually you will. We are still the same women that come to the screen door and say, what do you want with my son? What do you want with my husband? What do you want with my brother? No, you can't touch him. No, you can't come in. No, you won't harm him. No, you won't kill him. Unfortunately, we are the first ones at that screen door. And I wish that I could hug you and tell you that it's going to change tomorrow, but it ain't.
Yeah.
But what can change is how we internalize people's lack of understanding of what needs to be done. And we go on about our business, and you'll catch up sooner than later. And you better catch up sooner than later for your own good. So I tell you, little sister, that I know your heaviness, and I know what you're feeling, and I know how it feels to be outcasted within your own group of people. But once again, we are just as nuanced as any other group of people. But when it's time to come together as a monolith, remember that narrative empathy piece. The Black man knows the Black woman's story, whether he chooses to listen or not, because it is a part of him. That's where our contact theory lies. It's in your knowing of my narrative, because you share the same narrative as me, whether you're ready to admit it or not. And so you stand with your sisters when your brothers haven't come around yet. And I guarantee you they will.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's powerful. And also I really, one of the things that I've been doing, you know, even on social media, is following Black women who are doing innovative things, either in business or spoken word, or just in their everyday life. And what I'm finding is that Black women are really coming together more, even more now today. And what I hope is that Black women continue to come together and support each other, because that's what we need. And you're right, you know, people will follow. But I think it's important that we are supporting each other. And that doesn't always happen in spaces, but I can see that it is happening more now. And that gives me hope.
Can I just add something? I just want to say to Rachel to just be patient. Rome was not built in one day. Things don't happen overnight. You stand firm on who you are and what you believe, and keep showing up and be consistent in that. And one thing about tables is they do turn, and things will turn around, but you have to be patient. I know it's frustrating, but when people know better, they do better. So just continue to show up in the fullness of who you are. Keep believing in what you believe in. And a wise woman once told me, make sure you just hold on to the power of whatever position you take. And it will not be easy, but it'll be worth it.
They will. They will, absolutely. And Rachel, I have to say that you are an incredible leader. You are at the table at the United Nations, and I think that is extraordinary. So you're leading the way. You're doing the work, and I just commend you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was awesome. I want to take a few minutes and go back. I want to talk more with you, Deidre, because I know we're going to be finishing up shortly. But you spoke about Beyond My Detroit Everything movement. You spoke about Speak Your Mind, Mind Your Speech, and the Inclusion Cipher. How can people get involved in your workshops?
Mm-hmm. So my workshops, I tend to post when I'm at a university with the organization. And just as Kathy stated, soon we'll be getting some things going at the CLQ.
Mm-hmm.
And at the Kofi House, we're going to go into a lot of the things that we're talking about as far as visibility and sharing narrative and showing your visibility through art. And one of my influences of how important life through art is in the presence of that is Alan Locke. And
Yes.
he believed that art was key to Black liberation. Okay, so we're in the 20th century where there was protest and political unrest. Locke believed that art and the Great Migration, not political protests, were the keys to Black progress. And his reason being is because he believed that Black folk had to have something that they can be conceited about. And it goes deeper than just ego, but it's having a certain type of pride, so much so that it's unshakable. It lies in unshakable faith. It lies in an unshakable stance, just as Kathy was saying. And you have to have something that is visible. Once again, there's that presence piece. And so when you create art of any kind, in any medium, you have a presence even if you pass on. You have a presence even if you never stood up to speak in front of a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
You were just holding the protest signs themselves are art. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So that is the importance of it. And there's essays, one in particular, The New Negro, was Locke's seminal 1925 essay. And in it, he talks about the price that he's not willing to pay as far as laying his body down in the traditional way that we had come to know through our struggle as Blacks in America. But he instead adopted during the Harlem Renaissance era a new ideology that said, I'm not going to lay my life down that way, but I'm going to show you what my life is as a Black man in America, as a gay Black man in America. And I'm going to show you who I am this way. And you're not going to harm me. Instead, you're going to get a deeper scope into who I am through my art. So, that's one thing about being an artist and using your platform for more than just, I don't put together just fancy rhymes just to put them together. I was just challenged by an associate of mine who's a white male who had come to film me in one of the hip hop ciphers that we were hosting. And in it, I was speaking about the very things that I live. Now in the season, when it's time to put action behind the words he was so comfortable filming me about, is why does it have to be this way? Why does it need to be protest? Why does it have to be this way? Well, wait a minute now. You like the aggression and the forwardness and the progressiveness when it was on tape, when it was on CD, when it was on video. But now I'm actually in the street. Now I'm actually saying, no, we weren't just rhyming. We were actually letting you guys know what it was going to be. If you don't listen to what we say now, you're going to have to observe what we do later. So hear what I say now. Art says, hear what I'm telling you now, so that you're not offended by what I do later. And if you are offended by what I do later, I gave you a heads up. And that's why although I don't agree with everything Locke has to say, I do agree with that aspect of his ideology, because art is very important, and particularly art in Black America. We have shaped the rest of the world with our sound, and our sound is different from anyone else's sound because our experience is different. Black folk in America have a far different experience than any other people on this globe. And right now, what we're doing is we're dismantling the social constructs that are used in global stratification that tells us You stay in your place. We're saying, no, that ain't never been my place. Never been my place. And also, you can't tell me where to be. I tell you where I'm going to be through my art, through my rhyme, through my song, through my poems. I encourage you all, ladies, Black women and girls, please, if you have a moment, check out Audre Lorde's Litany of Survival poem. It's one that carries me through quite often.
Litany of Survival?
Yes, Litany of Survival, Audre Lorde.
Okay.
And she just captures the gravity of what it is to be Black and woman in the United States, and to use your voice in your words. Also, check out Ernie Chambers of Omaha, Nebraska. He's been in the game a long time. He talks about the power of your words. Representative out of Omaha, Nebraska. So this art that we do, the spoken word that I do, these raps that I do, they all serve a purpose. And granted, I do make them fun and easy on the ears so that the spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, you know? I do it. I say little slick things, and there's certain things that could be considered abrasive at times, but it's a certain way that I'll say it so that it hits who it needs to hit. I mean, I'm not deviating too far from what our ancestors did when they put things in code, when they were escaping bondage. Put it in code. You dress it up so outsiders don't know that song, but you make it pretty and memorable enough for all of us to sing. You understand? So it's a method to it. It's very sneaky.
I know we just have a few minutes left, and before we close out, I would love to invite you, Deidre, to say a few words, spoken word, if you can take it on.
Okay. I want to be right to carry my son or my daughter. I want to be clean, and so I go wade in the water. It's anarchy. We live in no law and no order. It's all Deidre. The essence is all a persona. I'm so meek, but my flowing is hot like a sauna. It's on me, so I'm thinking I really just ought to release heat, let it fall like a meteor shower. I feel weak, but my dreams be pushing me harder. I feel stuck, but my God be bringing me farther. You fit a fury on the page, a lyrical martyr. I got the music in my veins, just ask my mama. I'm making something out of nothing like Sabara. I'm looking for a brighter day, look past tomorrow, and get a penny to my name, no cash to borrow. I do 100 in the lane, so fast for throttle. You want to know me, pay attention. You can hear my hurts and my dreams and ambitions. People that be saying it, they know me, man, they tripping. They don't know my hurts and my dreams and ambitions. People, if you want to get to know me, you should listen. You can hear my hurts and my dreams and ambitions. People that be saying it, they know me, man, they tripping. They don't know my hurts and my dreams and ambitions. Listen. Please, Lord, let good be in my bloodline. I don't want to curse my kids. I want to love mine. Where there's darkness, please give me sunshine. Please be my guidance to wherever the road winds. Of course I dream of that green. I'm a gold mine. My life is like an intimate scene on a slow grind. It's something when your pockets is lean. You get a thug mind. They want to take advantage of we. You can trust I'll be thinking of them dangerous things in the nighttime, but I don't need the anger in me. I need a right mind. It's something when it's nothing to eat. And it's lunchtime to make you want to clutch knives and bust when it's crunch time. It ain't enough for the street to know you gifted. I'm stronger than the fifth, and the fifth Malcolm lifted. I balance on the cusp of street life and Afrocentric. Sometimes I fall in love with the hood and get addicted. Shit, I hate for the pain to stay on my conscience, but I ain't for the game and I ain't for the nonsense. I get sick of the talking and sick of the gossip. Get me sick to my stomach sometime and I vomit and I flow for the saints and flow for the convicts. I get beef in the street like Hov and Nas, and you can't see the dream and you can't see the logic. I'm just tripping. Let me stick to the topic. My God, you want to know me, pay attention. You can hear my hurts and my dreams and ambitions. People that be saying it, you know me, man, they tripping. They don't know my hurts and my dreams and ambitions. People, if you want to get to know me, you should listen. You can hear my hurts and my dreams and ambitions. People that be saying it, you know me, man, they tripping. They don't know my hurts and my dreams and ambition. It was good morning, heartache. Now it's good morning, sunshine. I feel okay. I thought I lost me at one time. A new day has been given by the Elohim, changing my perspective and the way I'm viewing everything. I was crippled with emotional arthritis. I was sleeping on your words, so I guess I had the itis, all rightis. Just that I was spiritually dormant. This world kicked my ass in and used me as a doormat. I wasn't for that. I tried that all format. Get humble, never mumble, and boldly approach a throne. Be ready for a rumble. If you were at it alone, I was gone. But you were here all along and I was wrong. For not seeking your counsel, going round for round like I was Hector Camacho. Got knocked to the ground, a blow cold, that's gazpacho soup. Now I'm doing everything he called me to. Woke up this morning, stretching and yawning, and I'm still wanting more of you. Woke up this morning, stretching and yawning, and I'm still wanting more of you. It feels good to be back in a space where your light radiates and my mind meditates on your grace and your peace and your glory and your mercy. My heart skips a beat because I know you're so worthy of my praise. I've been wrapped up in this feeling, y'all, for days. Happy feelings, Frankie Beverly and Maze. I understand that your ways are not my ways, and that's okay. I'll flip a page in the book of life and start a new chapter. I'm so Anita Baker, get me caught up in the rapture. Put me under the water, get me clean and get me dapper. Yeah, I'm dying in Adam, so I'm gonna do what I have to do. To get better in my walks with you. And get better in my talks with you. I'll learn to speak the way you taught me to. We woke up this morning, stretching and yawning, and we're still wanting all our truth. Woke up this morning, we stretching and yawning, and we're still wanting all our truth. Thanks.
Oh my God. That was, oh my goodness, Deidre.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, ladies. I mean,
Thank you.
this has been very healing for me. This whole process from start to finish. God bless y'all and thank you for all of your work.
God bless you. God bless all of y'all. We just got a message from one of our participants, David, and he says that let's see. He said, "You ladies inspire me in ways you don't know." And then Rachel again says, "That was amazing. Thank you." I don't have no words. I just want to say thank you so much to each of you for taking time today. Thank you to Famika for the love of her. Thank you to Deidre on my Detroit Everything. Thank you to Pamela and Kathy, Ruth Ellis Center and the Center for Lesbian and Queer Women and Girls. And then I'm here from Bell Global Justice Institute. I just want to, before we log off, I'm going to send you all, everyone that signed up, contact information for all our speakers. And I just want to leave everyone with a quote by Mother Harriet Tubman. It's my favorite quote. It's about finding the leader within. And she says, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world." Harriet Tubman. Remember those words. Thank you so much, Deidre. That is power. You just spoke power, girl. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. And this will be up soon because we recorded it, so you'll be able to see it again. Okay.
And
thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, London. Thank you, London, for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
God bless y'all. Stay safe, y'all.
You too.